Hello everyone, my name is MansaMusa and welcome back to my channel. Today we're back with another replay analysis in Advanced Wars by Web. We'll be analyzing today Game 2 in the tournament series that we started a few weeks ago. Game 1 will be linked up top, but if you missed it, I've been participating in the Amarriner Cup. The Amarriner Cup is the premier standard play tournament on Advanced Wars by Web. This game is round 2 of the tournament and took place on the map Bel'Shir Beach. This map was also a tier 4 matchup, I believe, so you had a very limited choice of COs. I think the main ones people were picking that I saw were Cole, Adder, and Jess. Cole and Adder are the main movement COs, and Jess is kind of the more vehicle-based CO. So it provides a very interesting matchup on this map, kind of the style you want to play. There are a lot of roads, so I don't think movement was as necessarily as important, which is why I went with Jess. But I also really liked my opponent's pick of Adder as well. Obviously, he's one of the strongest tier 4 COs. Having that quick power and quick movement availability is going to be good no matter what map you're on. So we have a very interesting matchup in store for us in this game. Briefly talking about my opponent a bit, in this game I was facing Thomas Alexander, and his profile in Advanced Wars by Web is pretty minimal. He doesn't play that many Global League games. He's around an 1100 rated player. But I've seen a lot of players like this on the site that are mainly tournament players. You know, there's quite a few people who just kind of play this game casually and then hop into the tournaments when they want to. They don't necessarily play as much Global League, which I think is, totally fine. But when the ELOs are based off of the Global League only, you kind of don't always know who you're running into in these tournaments sometimes. Sometimes you'll have these kind of silent killers who are a lot better than their ELO is actually stating. Without further ado, though, let's hop right into this game. MansaMusa versus Thomas Alexander on Bel'Shir Beach. Going through these first few turns of any match, we're going to start with our early caps, and there wasn't much interesting I found in the capture phase. I made the choice here to skip some of the early income moving to the right to attack these central cities, and I kind of will explain the reasoning of that as I move along. But it was a deliberate choice I made to kind of go for the center and skip some early income. And the reason why I think you'll see is actually on this turn. I buy a recon, and my whole idea for this opening, because I'm Jess and I have better vehicles, is if I can get my recon into the center and he tries to go for it, my recon should be able to knock his infantry down to 4 HP, meaning that even if he's halfway through a cap and he's gotten it down to... If he's halfway down through a cap and he's on 10 HP left on the city, and I knock it down to 5, he can still get it within 2 turns. But if I knock it down to 4, then it's 3 turns, and he basically has to abandon that capture. So recons are really good on this map regardless because of how many roads and shoals there are. You can really go north, middle, or south. But they're especially good for chess, I think. So I go for the recon opening and intending to pressure the center here. My opponent just goes for a standard opening, more economically based, just getting the early properties. And I send my recon out to the north. Moving to my opponent's turn, he builds a tank in response to this recon, but like I said, this recon can really go any one of the directions here, so I knew he was going to build a tank to respond to it, so my idea here is wherever the tank goes, I'm not going to go. So if he sends his tank north, I'm going to go south, and vice versa, because there's going to be infantry everywhere, and I'll have opportunities to interrupt. I also choose to place my recon on the city just in case he wanted to get cheeky and skip finishing this cap to capture the center city and bring his tank out to cover it. I just stopped that possibility as well because I really kind of want, ideally to get this city, but if I can also get the city and deny this one, that's going to be a really big advantage for me. Elsewhere, I'm moving out to get some more early captures. And you can see on my funding curve, I don't have enough for a tank this turn, but I will be building a tank as well on my next turn. So he brings his tank out in range of my recon, and he actually has a really good placement for this tank because he has coverage to the south and to the north, so he's also kind of realizing that this recon can basically go anywhere, so he's putting it in a pretty neutral spot. Moving to my turn, I finish the capture in the center, start my captures down in the south, and move my recon on top of the HQ. This is basically the only spot to the north that he couldn't reach me from, and now I'm going to be threatening basically all the properties up here. And my main idea is to actually start interrupting this airport. Adder's battlecopters are significantly better than Jess's. Jess has obviously an attack penalty on her battlecopters, and Adders also get the movement benefit of his power. So if I can deny my opponent from getting battlecopters for a good chunk of this game, that is going to be a huge advantage for me. So putting my recon up here to really make it a pain to actually finish this airport capture. The battlecopters are just also especially good on this map in particular, just because of how close they can reinforce to both this area of the map and the center. I mean, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can get to this tile in one turn from this airport and start attacking potential units I may have in this choke point. So battlecopters are going to be very strong on this map, so any chance I can take to deny him is going to be a good move by myself. Other than that, though, I get a tank of my own to start addressing his, and I just pass my turn. My opponent does go ahead and start the airport capture, moves out his infantry down here in the middle to get this city capture, and puts his tank on this tile. And now this tank does now cover his infantry on the airport, but it's still, as well as, this infantry on the city. So my recon, the 2 infantry that it can attack, well, it also could attack this one, but it's not capturing anything, so it's not really a point of doing that. The 2 important infantry that it could attack are both covered by this tank. But I'm going to go for this one on the airport just because of what we talked about earlier. He builds another tank. I go for the interrupt here on the city. Because it is on an airport, I believe this is a roll, whether it went to 4 or 5, but he does get lucky and it goes down to 5 here. And I move my infantry up to the north and bring my tank to the center as well. This map, I will say, is bigger than it first appears. That's why you're not seeing, I mean, we're on day 7 and there really hasn't been, this is the first engagement that we've had. But these following days is really when we're going to start to see the action. Now we're each going to be building, 2 tanks per turn, or pretty close to that, so we're really going to start seeing unit count increase. He gets the hit off on the recon. Again, I was totally fine for this, for delaying it that extra turn. And he brings that tank to the north, and he's going to bring his other tank to the center. He also brings this artillery out. Artillery are great on this map. It's a very choke point centered map, so having tanks kind of in this 2 squares, and then artillery can both defend this city and prevent a lot of pressure they're going to be putting in this part of the map as well. Also important to note is that the HQs, there's no black boat on either of the HQs, which makes them very vulnerable. So sometimes some of the things I've seen on this map before are just clumps of units pressure towards the center here that do a very kind of sweeping attack from the left and the center here onto your opponent's HQ. It's a very viable strat, so control the center is going to be a very important part of this map. If you have it, you can really threaten your opponent's HQ, and if you don't, you're pretty much going to lose the game. Moving to my turn, I put my tank on the missile silo to give it extra defense in range of this tank, but again, I don't really care because I'm Jess. I'm going to have better tank engagements, and I'm on better terrain. I bring this tank out to the north, start some more captures, choose to basically just sacrifice my recon to slow this cap another turn. Again, I really don't want him to get battlecopters for as long as I can, and build an artillery of my own to get some pressure here in the middle as well. My opponent continues his captures, gets his tank out to the north to protect his infantry. They're going to be trying to capture these cities. Generally, how the sides work here is that blue is going to get these 3 cities, and then we'll fight over this city, and then the opposite for red. So I'm going to get these 3 cities, and we're going to fight over this one in the long term. So he goes actually for a forward capture here on this city, which is, I'll back up, I'll talk about the tank engagement in a second, but he goes for a forward capture on this city, which I think is a bit bold. I don't necessarily agree with it. I'm definitely going to get the city in the long run, so I don't really have a lot that can interrupt it in the near term, because this tank is really guarding this tank that he's about to strike, and he knows that. That's why he's going for this capture, but long term, I don't think it's really going to matter. Even if he does capture the city, I'm going to get it back in a few turns anyway, and he may be sacrificing at least the positioning of that infantry a bit. So he goes for the engagement here, 6-7 on the tank on the missile silo. Again, even though he's getting the first strike, I'm getting the better engagement. And then he does go ahead and put his artillery back to guard the tank as well. And this is a good play, this is what we talked about with the choke pointiness of this map, but I do believe I have some counterplay to this exact play. It's something I saw in the move planner before making my turn. My opponent builds a battlecopter, again scared now that I just got my airport online. Again, battlecopters are very good on this map, and I could potentially build one and attack this tank like we've talked about on the very next turn, so an anti-air is definitely a wise choice in this scenario. Moving to my turn, I go back and heal this tank, move some infantry out, and go ahead and go for the clearing of the tank, fully in range of both his tank and his artillery. And my reasoning for this is, one, so I can start this capture on the city, which is now going to be pretty much impossible for him to interrupt unless he wants to do it with his artillery, and the artillery has bigger fish to fry. And I'm going to be bringing in 4 tanks now into this area and really starting to threaten this middle hard. So even if he comes in and, you know, hits my tank and then hits my tank again with his tank, I'm going to have the ability to clear out that entire push, especially because, you know, I praised this anti-air. I do think it was a good buy. But now he has a really significant tank disadvantage in the center, so it may not be the wisest move for him to really go in and actually do this attack on my tank on the missile silo. I go ahead and also build a battlecopter and 3 infantry here. Again, if he does bring his tank in to attack mine, this battlecopter is now in range to also clear the path of the way here and attack his artillery. He finally gets his airport online. Again, I feel happy about how long I've been able to delay it. Puts more pressure down here in the south, including bringing his anti-air down here. The anti-air now has some coverage both to the north and the south, which is nice. It's in a good position. But ultimately, I would kind of recommend against this type of push. The edges of the map seem very tempting because there's a lot of properties down here. I think that's kind of the trap of this map, is there's a lot of income down here. But it's, I would argue, really not the important part of the map. I think the important part of the map is the center, just because I've talked about before that the HQ is so open. So doing this type of swinging attack and putting a lot of pressure on the HQ is how I think a lot of games are going to end, especially if you overinvest too much resources into fighting for these corners. I also left this infantry open. This was a free hit. I wanted to put in pressure in this area, so I was kind of just fine with this free hit, especially because I can still interrupt this city if I want with this infantry. So I knew that coming in, leaving that infantry there on the city. He goes ahead and builds a medium tank. That's really smart. I have 4 normal tanks in this infantry. Going back to more Degis advice, you know, always bringing up some of the grandmasters and how they play the game. They always say, you know, when you have 3 tanks in an area, a medium tank's a good buy, especially because of how close this medium tank can reinforce, right? He's 1-2 turns away from where all of these tanks are. So it's going to be a very useful defensive deterrent for the pressure I'm putting on. I get my comm tower and some more infantries down in the south. Some more cities, not some more infantries. and continue the pressure. And now I'm going to go for kind of a positioning tactic, going for the middle and the south a bit. So again, I'm attacking this infantry that got the capture on the city. I'm going to get in the long term. This is why I wasn't a huge fan of it. He's basically thrown away this infantry just for a few turns of income. And you can see I'm positioning, still having pressure in the center, but also meeting him where he's at with these units, especially because this medium tank could go down to the south as well. I go ahead and get the interrupts in the north, create kind of a pseudo wall or half wall up here, so he can't reach my tank with his tank, and build an anti-air of my own to respond to him getting the airport. I will also mention on this turn, before we move into the next one, I was considering some shenanigans here of capturing his HQ and really threatening it. I think I could have moved my tank in here and kind of blocked it off a bit, but I couldn't block off everything completely. He didn't leave me an open win condition, but that is something to always check. If you ever play this map in the future, or if you're in one of these tournament matches, kind of going on the slower side of the tournament, always look out for HQ captures on maps like this. And, you know, I would argue keep your infantry on cities like this. That way they're centrally located, but also are always a threat. Because you never know when your opponent's going to mess up, and at the bare minimum, it makes them always put their infantry and their units somewhat close to their HQ to have protection routes against kind of a cheeky cap of the HQ. Moving on to my opponent's turn, though, he starts more of his captures up north, gets a bit more defensive with his tank, responding to my own, and move his second tank in there as well to provide more assistance in that area. Again, though, I think he is kind of over-focusing a bit on the north and south. I know I'm bringing my units a bit to the south as well, but you can still see that they're all able to swing to the middle if needed. So I think padding 2 tanks up here is maybe a bit of a mistake, especially when I really only have, you know, a 2 HP infantry that's in threat of really doing anything. Yes, these infantry can interrupt, but these cities I'm basically just giving to him So I don't think necessarily bringing 2 tanks was necessarily needed. He probably could have put the other one on his HQ and focused more a bit on the center. Realizing that he should not fight here, which is smart. Like, these cities belong to me, and with my airport especially right close to him, it's just not a good idea to fight in this area. He tries to centralize his anti-air and his tank as well, and brings in his medium tank to provide additional support. So now he's kind of getting the idea that I think this map's really about, which is center control. He goes ahead and builds a battlecopter as well as tank into infantry. Unit count, like on any map, very important. You can see 28 to 27, we're about the same there, and pretty similar in income. So there's really no clear winner at this point. I do have a 1k income lead on my opponent, but he's going to get that back with some of these captures up here in the north. I go ahead and capture this city just because he's basically leaving it open to me unless he wants to bring his tank or anti-air back down, which he's not going to want to do. Bring my battlecopter and tank here, just provide additional support, and bring actually another tank. And this is actually, I think, where I'm going wrong now. I am doing the exact thing that I criticized my opponent for, which is I'm focusing too much on an attack down here in the south and leaving the center open. This is not necessary. He's really, he has his power available, so he could attack, like this infantry and whatnot, and these 2 units could come in, but there's not a bunch of threats outside of that. Like, I got, I think, too greedy trying to capture or flip this city, and I really should have just kind of made this a skeleton army and let my infantry slowly get these caps instead of just putting my entire army in a corner where it can't really fight as well as it can in the middle. But mistakes being mistakes, I bring out my other infantry as well. Here I started to create this wall. I think this 4 across wall is very strong in this area. It's really annoying to get through, and this is kind of basically the line you want to be fighting anyway, right? This is the city you want to protect. So if you get, like, I don't know, like an artillery in this forest or something, or even like on, I don't know, like this plain tile here, you're going to have great coverage of everything that you want, and you just always bring in fresh infantry to basically replace anything that you have on this wall. Only real threat is like him going on a power and killing this infantry on a road, but he's either going to need to get power for that or an anti-air. I centralized the rest of my units, putting the artillery on here on the city, bringing my anti-air as well to address his battlecopter, put the tank on the city, move this battlecopter up to as well provide additional support for the center, and kind of end my turn at this point. But I want to talk about this board state for a second, because there is a huge mistake that I am making on this turn that I've talked about in previous matches, but I think it's really relevant to bring it up here because you really will see it on any map, and that is that I am not centralizing my forces. I am dabbling here. I have a army of 3 down in the south, an army of 3/4 here in the center, and an army of 1/2 in the north. That is not how you want to play Advanced Wars. That is bad unit maintenance, because what is it going to happen here? He is going to crush me on one of these 3 fronts, and my other 2 fronts are not going to be able to adequately reinforce because they're so far away, right? This is not like a tiny 10x12 map where these units can be in 1 or 2 range turns of each other. These units are a lifetime away from some of these fights that are going to happen here in the north, especially with his battlecopter being within 1 turn range of some of these units as well. And especially because my opponent is about to get his power and do kind of a devastating push. We talked about earlier in this turn that these 3 units were a mistake, but it's really becoming prevalent now. These 3 units should have been more towards the center here, maybe around my HQ at the very worst. But really trying to get greedy and go for this cap has cost me a lot of positioning and, honestly, a lot of this game at this point if my opponent has a really good turn on his next turn and is able to get his power. That being said, I build a medium tank to provide some additional assistance in the center, and I pass it to my opponent's turn. I will say, before we move into my opponent's turn, that I spent some time before my last turn there in Move Planner looking for the best possible reaction by my opponent. Like, what is the best possible turn he could do? Because he first has to get his power in order to do really any kind of devastating push that we talked about, like breaking through this infantry wall up north and attacking these units and getting this medium tank in range of this artillery, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's not in range right now, so he needs to get his power if he wants to get a potential attack on this artillery, which would be devastating. So I felt kind of safe in that regards that it would be pretty hard for him to pull that off. And I did find a few ways where he could have a semi-devastating turn, but not something that I could come back from. So I was comfortable kind of making this move. Again, I still do think it's a mistake with my positioning, but I didn't think it was the worst turn in the world. But my opponent does have a really good turn here, and we'll kind of go through what he did. So the first thing, he gets some engagements, kills off this infantry, attacks this tank on bad terrain, so you may be asking why is he doing this, but again, it's to get power charge. Attacks this tank with his battlecopter. He does now have his power. Gets a few caps, and pops side slip. With side slip, he goes for a unit sacrifice, which is, again, very smart, a tactic I've talked about in the past a lot of times to weaken this infantry on the road. Kills that infantry and finishes off the tank with his own tank, and now you'll notice that this anti-air, which was previously in position, the move planner's not showing as well, you can see it was previously in position to attack the battlecopter, but now since I can't go through this route, I'm actually not in range to attack this battlecopter, which is devastating. Goes for some engagements down south as well, and now is the real game kind of changing push here in the center. So is able to get the attack on the artillery since he was able to clear it out with the anti-air, bringing it down to 2. Very devastating. Getting his own artillery in range as well. Starts some more captures up in the north, builds a battlecopter and a tank, moves his infantry out to really protect this artillery and some of the other units he has in the area. Builds an artillery, another infantry, and we go to my turn, and I resign the game. Yeah, talking a bit why I resigned here, let's just take a quick look at the board state. This medium tank is not in range yet to really provide any assistance. Even with power, it can't do anything. This anti-air is not in range of the battlecopter. My tank and my artillery, if I fight with them, they're going to die, so I pretty much have to retreat. The only healthy unit I have in this area is this battlecopter, and if I go for an attack on my opponent's battlecopter, his own anti-air is going to be there to destroy it. So I'm just completely out of position. There is no comeback turn here. I would have to completely retreat, and when I'm down 25k, then down unit count at that point, it's just completely lost, especially because, like we talked about earlier, there is no black belt on the HQ. If I give him complete center control, which is what I would have to do, he would just send his units all the way south and capture my HQ within 3 or 4 days. The game at this point is lost, and it's completely lost, again, because of sending my units down here for basically no reason, trying to get greedy with this capture, which I didn't need to do. That being said, congratulations to my opponent, Thomas Alexander. He played an absolutely amazing game. Completely took advantage of me on this really kind of subpar turn that I had. Really nice job finding the moves to get your power there, and then finding the unit sacrifice, which was really strong to kill off this tank and prevent my anti-air from coming in. All of that was part of a very high-level turn, and I think really just won this match instantly on the spot. So mad props to Thomas. I hope you have a great rest of the tournament. I know on that side of the bracket you will eventually face JJ Empire, I think who's one of the mods, or one of the mods of the Advanced Wars by Web Discord. So nice guy, definitely one of the pillars of the community, so that'll be a fun game to watch. I'll definitely be following that one. But yeah, that'll be the end of my story here in the Amarriner Cup. Going out in round 2, just like the last Amarriner Cup I played, is a bit unfortunate. But I really have to give the props to Thomas. He played an absolutely amazing game, and I look forward to watching some of his future matches and maybe featuring some more on the channel if he plays another insane game. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. My name is MansaMusa, and remember, centralize your units and don't get greedy. Bye, guys.